Welcome to the Dad Nation podcast, where men go from good to great in their life and love. Listen, now more than ever, our world needs strong, courageous, and compassionate men, because we believe that when the dad gets better, the whole family wins. Now listen, this movement is called Dad Nation, but ultimately this is for the wives, the children, and the generations to come, because we believe that every wife and child deserves a father who is pursuing greatness. Now, I am your host, Mitchell Osmond, and I'm so grateful and I'm so humbled that you've chosen to spend your most precious resource, which is your time, with me today. I say this all the time, but I'm grateful. I'm grateful for your time and how much time you spend tuning into this podcast. So it's my intention to always bring value and always help you the best way I know how to serve you in a powerful way. And so today, we're going to switch it up a little bit. Typically, we have bi-weekly, we have guests come on, and then the opposite weeks, I'm teaching on something, and there's a bit of a scheduling conflict. And so this week is typically when we're having an expert or an influencer in, where we're talking about something. But today it's going to be me again. I guess you're stuck with me again this week, but I promise to deliver. All right. Today's podcast episode is going to be a little bit shorter, but it's going to be really simple. It's going to be based around, some of the fears that we face as men. But more importantly, I want to share with you the top 10 questions that have changed my life forever. Okay. Top 10 questions that have changed my life. These are questions that stop you dead in your tracks. These are questions that make you pause and question where you're at, what you're doing, and why you're doing it. And I'm sharing them today with you because I believe that they do have the power to change your life as well as they have mine. Listen, we're going to get into it, but there's power in great questions. And I do genuinely believe that there's a direct correlation between the quality of the questions that we ask and the quality of answers we get, in marriage and parenting, and more importantly, the questions we ask ourselves. Because here's the thing, and we talk about this in the context of marriage all the time. I tell people, if you want to have great conversation with your wife, don't ask her the same boring dead-end questions, because you're going to get the same boring dead-end answers. Like, how did you sleep? Good. How are the kids? Good. How was your day? Good. Right? So if you ask great questions, you'll get great answers. If you ask boring questions, you get boring answers. If you ask no questions, you will get no answers, more in the context of yourself, right? These are some of the most uncomfortable questions that I've asked myself over the years, that I've read, that I've been asked by other mentors, but they happen to be the most profound and most impacting. Asking, like I said in the beginning, asking myself these questions have brought more clarity and led to more transformation than anything else in my life. And so these questions they're going to be similar. Some of the questions are going to be similar, but they have different nuances, and some of them have slightly different wording, and that's by design, right? Some questions are going to pop out to you when you hear them, and some questions are going to flop, and that's fine, because it's going to be different for every single person who is listening. But here's the challenge to you today. Whatever questions that I ask, if they resonate with you, if they hit deep, I want you to write them down. And I want you to, when you get home or whatever you're doing, or whenever you get a moment, I want you to write them down and actually answer them, work with them, right? Because these questions are going to help you get out of your head, okay? That's what these questions are designed to do, because we get stuck in our head. They're designed to help you filter out your fears, because we have all kinds of fears, which we're going to talk about in a minute here. But we have fears about what other people will think. We have fears about if we fail. We have fears about what our families might think, what our wives might think, what our kids might think. And that's normal, right? We all do that, because if you're anything like me, for years, I didn't make decisions based on what was best for me. I limited my decisions to what was least scary. And as there's a high probability that as you hear these questions, you might feel something bubbling up, or if you give your answer, you may be tempted to give an answer that's the most safe or the least scary. But what I want you to do is answer the question based on what's best for you, for your family, for your relationships, for your future, all those different things. Make sense? And here's the thing. I was talking about this with a group that I'm a part of a little while ago. And I was saying, we live our lives filtered by fear. We ask ourselves, what will they say if I fail? Will I look stupid if this doesn't work? What if they don't take me seriously? What will she think if I said that? Will they still like me if I do this? I mean, a little bit of insider information here. I mean, this whole Dad Nation vision, this podcast, the community that I've started, all that stuff. It took me about 3 years to just get the courage to do that, because one of the biggest things that were holding me back was, what if they don't take me seriously? I was struggling with that. Like, what if I have things to share but nobody cares? Who would listen to me? Right? And so it took me 3 years to get over that fear. So hopefully by listening to this episode, I can expedite that process and help you work through things a little bit faster so you can make better decisions for your future. So before we get into these questions, we're going to talk about this fear of failure that we all have, right? So I want you to choose an area of your life. Maybe it's your career, maybe it's your marriage, maybe it's your relationship with your kids. Maybe it's your fitness levels or your confidence, how you see yourself. Maybe it's your finances, your money, or your ability to provide or protect. I want you to reflect on where your fears might be holding you back from fully committing in these different areas. For example, are there any fears that are holding you back from having conversations that will draw you closer to your wife? Are there any fears that maybe you're not acknowledging or not facing that are holding you back from doing what you love instead of settling for what you can tolerate? So I want you to consider an area of your life and even as I'm saying this, there's going to be something that pops up. I know it, right? There's going to be a little bug in your ear, a little chime that goes off that will tell you this is an area that you need to pay attention to. And I want you to take that area and I want you to imagine a scenario where fear was not a factor. If it's in what you do for a living. If fear was not a factor, would your current career path still be the same? If fear was not a factor, would your marriage look any different? If fear was not a factor, would you take a chance and run that half marathon? If fear was not a factor, would you be earning a living the same way that you are now? Or if you truly weren't afraid, would you take the chance that you know you need to take? You see, we often talk about our edge, pushing our edge. This is the limit of our comfort zone as men. And your edge is kind of where you stop short. You compromise on your talents and your dreams and you give in to your fears and you stop at that edge. This is where you cave and you say, I can't make that jump. It's too scary. I can't take that risk in starting my dream business because X, Y, and Z. I can't have that conversation with my wife because I can't start that business or pursue that passion project because ... right? But what if you took that leap? And if you're listening to this and you still believe that you are completely fearless, I want to gently but firmly let you know that you are lying to yourself. It's important to acknowledge that everyone experiences fear. Denying it would be dishonest to yourself and to those around you, because fear is a part of being human. Fear is a part of being a man, even more specifically. And true freedom will only come from recognizing, verbalizing, and confronting your fears. Think about this. Imagine if scientists stopped after their first cure didn't work. Think about all the diseases that have been cured, all the good that would have never happened. There have been hundreds of thousands of failures, but it is through the failure that comes success. So don't fear failure. Don't fear experimenting. You see, great men understand that failure is delay, not defeat. I'm going to say that again. Failure is delay, not defeat. You see, this is a healthy mindset when it comes to your future. And actually, not only should you accept it, but you should anticipate it, because you will face adversity. And that's not only normal, it's essential. I love this quote by one of my favorite coaches. His name is Rich Liv, and he says this: failing is not a problem you will face. Failing is how you get there. One of my favorite Mark Twain quotes is this. He says, I'm an old man and I've known many great troubles, but most of them have never happened. So we need to understand that when we hold back from going after our goals and our dreams because of fear, that's not always self-sabotage. Sometimes that's just self-protection. And that's pretty normal. But unfortunately, in most cases, your success, or however you define success in your situation, lies on the other side of your comfort zone. And it will require you to be uncomfortable. One of my favorite quotes about confidence is this: confidence is a result, not a requirement. I believe you've heard me say that on this show before. And that's interesting because we often hold back on taking a chance or making a change because we're waiting to be more confident to do the thing. But how could you be more confident with complete uncertainty and lack of knowledge of what the future will look like? It's impossible, right? It's impossible. Confidence can only come from results after you take the leap. It's not a requirement to take the leap. Confidence is a result, not a requirement. And some of us not only have fears, but we have a fear of feeling fear. Does that make sense? It's a little bit meta, right? But some of us men fear the feeling of fear and often refuse to even approach their edge, to even approach their discomfort. They don't come close to reaching their full potential because they're afraid of the discomfort that will come from the unknown and the insecurities, the potential of failure. But let me tell you, my friend, if you're listening to this is no way to live. This kind of living will result in you being stable and comfortable, but it will leave you feeling dead and purposeless. Here's a quote from Tim Tebow that I heard a little while ago, and he says this: adversity is either here, it's just left, or it's on its way. You see, we should never try to pretend or live without adversity, but to acknowledge it and anticipate it because it will come. And when it comes, the question is, how do you deal with that adversity? How do you deal with those fears? So with that, understanding that we often filter our lives through a filter of fear, and then we wrestle with these things, now that we can acknowledge that, hey, we're all on the same page here. We all wrestle with fear and the unknown, all right? I'm going to ask you these 10 questions. Gentlemen, listen, I want to interrupt you just for 30 seconds to tell you something that I'm personally so excited about, and that is the fact that I've launched an exclusive private Facebook community for the members of Dad Nation. And so if you are listening to this and you are a man and you're a husband or a father or you're soon to be, this place is a safe space for you to come and ask any questions you have. Maybe there are things that you are having a hard time with, a challenge you're facing, and your family's not always the right place to vent about these things. Iron sharpens iron, and men just need to get around one another, support one another, and to help each other out. So listen, if that is you, if you're lacking community, if you're lacking support, or you're just feeling like you need some encouragement or safe place to talk about the things that are challenging you most, nothing is off the table because this is a private community and we all make an agreement to keep the content confidential. So if that's you, I want you to hit up the link that's going to be posted in the show notes below and then apply to be a part of this group. There is a bit of an application process, just a couple questions you have to answer. But listen, it's only been going for a few days and we're already seeing some incredible conversations happening. And so hit the link and sign up, and we will see you on the inside. And there's no rhyme or reason, there's no order or sequence to these questions. They're simply just 10 questions that over the last 10 years have resonated with me in a deep way. And these are questions that I have been asked, and now these are questions that I ask other men that I work with as well. And I've seen the effects of it apply to other men's lives as well. So number one, first question is this: if you were to call me in 3 years and you say, holy cow, Mitch, life is awesome and I'm so happy, tell me what your life would look like in detail. Get specific. For example, where are you living? How old are your kids? How is your marriage going? How do you communicate? How much money do you make, right? How do you talk to yourself? How self-confident are you? What's your emotional life like? What's your spiritual life like? Get very, very specific. What kind of car are you driving? Right? What are you eating for food? How often do you work out? And I want you to actually write that movie scene, if you will, of your life 3 years from now. That would make you call me and be like, man, my life is incredible. What is that scene? And tell me a little bit about it and work your way backward from there. This was one of the coolest visualization exercises I've ever done. And I started to write out what that looks like. And I wrote out in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years, this is what an epic, incredible life would look like. Number two, and this question comes from Seth Godin. It's a very common question to a lot of us in this space. And I believe I've asked it on this podcast before, but the question is, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And the reason why this question is so great is because it helps you strip away your fears, because we fear that we're going to fail. We fear what other people are going to think about if we fail. And so if failure was not an option, what would you do? If you knew you'd be successful and you would have the respect of your peers, respect of your family, if you did this thing, what would you do? No holds barred. Pull off the limits. I asked a guy this a little while ago, and he said, I'd be a professional trail runner, and because he's a runner and he loves to run on the side as a hobby. He gets up every, weekend and he does half marathons, he does marathons. And it took us a while to get to that point, but he said, I'd be a professional trail runner. And I thought, man, that's such a great answer to that question. The number 3 question here is, what would a blank person do in this situation? What would a blank person do? Fill in the blank of whatever it is that you need help with, right? Now, in the psychology space, this is simply just called externalizing, right? Now, this question is related to something called the Solomon's paradox, which I've talked about before, which you can look up in previous episodes, or you can just YouTube it. But essentially, the whole paradox here is that we can give other people incredible advice. We can give people the exact steps that they need to take to get out of their situations. But when it comes time to look at our own lives and give ourselves advice, we're often terrible at listening to our own advice. That's because we look at other people's lives with a telescope, and we look at our lives through a microscope. And even though we may know what we need to do, it's often filtered by expectations, insecurities, all those different things. The whole premise comes from King Solomon, which was known to be the most wise king in history. He's incredibly wealthy and goes down in history as one of the wisest men that ever lived. However, his personal life was a complete failure. He made very bad decisions, but that's because he couldn't take his own advice. And that's where the paradox comes from. And so how you apply it is in this situation where perhaps you come home from work and your kids are screaming, the house is crazy, and your wife is upset, and you feel your blood pressure rise when you come home from work. Ask yourself in the moment, what would a patient person do? What would a patient husband do? If you feel like making an impulsive purchase, a decision financially, pause, ask yourself, what would a financially responsible person do? If you just get out of the gym and you're super hungry after a big workout and you want to go to McDonald's and crush a burger, ask yourself, what would a fit person do? It's interesting because that question helps us, again, externalize and get outside of ourselves and ask ourselves, okay, what would another person that's making a good decision do? Because intuitively we know what we should do. We do. If we ask ourselves and we genuinely wrestle with the answer, we know what we need to do. Another way of phrasing this question is, what does your wiser self know that you pretend not to or would rather avoid? What would your wiser self know? And while we're here and on this conversation, I just want to add another, maybe a point or a sub-point to this question. Another question I've asked people in the past is, what would the 10 years from now version of you do right now? If 10 years down the road, if that Mitch could come back into today and give you some advice, what would he tell you to do? What would he tell you to do, right? It's another way of externalizing. Number 4, and this is one question that I often ask Sam, my wife, if you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about yourself and relationships, what would it be? What small steps could you take in that direction? Or you could apply this magic wand concept to anything. If you could wave a magic wand and have everything you want in your marriage, what would you fix? If you could wave a magic wand and have everything you want in your parenting, it's a really good question that just is kind of fun, but it allows you to really kind of think blue sky. And I don't know why this works. It just does, You can have this conversation with your spouse too, creating an open conversation about, then that's how I've used it. I've said to Sam, if you could wave a magic wand and fix anything in our marriage, what would it be? It's just grounds for a great conversation. Number 5, this question's a heavy one, but if you had a year left to live, what relationship would you most want to repair or reconnect with? And why does that connection matter? I mean, you think about that, right? Think about the end of your life. If you went to the doctor tomorrow and came home with a diagnosis and the doctor said you have 1 year, what is the first relationship you go to repair? And why does that relationship matter so much? And the next step, of course, would be then to pursue that person and seek amends. Number 6, this is another great question, is what are you tolerating? What are you tolerating in your life? Now you can split that up. You can segment it in to get more specific. Like, what are you tolerating in your marriage, in your finances, in your parenting, in your fitness? What are you tolerating in your environment? Is it a messy bedroom? Is it a messy office? What are you tolerating in your finances? Is it a messy retirement planning? Is it messy budgeting? What are you tolerating in your marriage? Are you tolerating disrespect, lack of appreciation, abuse? What are you tolerating in your body? Extra weight that you're just kind of ignoring? Or are you tolerating a lack of exercise? What are you tolerating in your extended family? This is a big one. Are there people violating boundaries with you, or they have unhealthy expectations or uncommunicated tensions? What are you tolerating? Hey friend, thank you so much for tuning in to the Dad Nation podcast today. And because you're here, I want to give you a free gift for listening. And this is called Igniting Intimacy. 44 questions to ask your wife to connect deeply and spark intimacy. Maybe you're watching this and you just feel like conversation is just growing real boring in your marriage. Or maybe you've heard from your wife that she feels like she's married to a robot, or that we don't ever talk anymore, or you don't talk about how you feel. If you've heard any of these things from your wife or felt any of these things, you need to download this free gift for you, because listen, the key to connection with your wife is through quality conversation and quality questions. Okay, I promise this will not disappoint. So check out the show notes below on YouTube or whatever streaming platform you're listening on, or you could just head to dadnationco.com/intimacy for that free gift for you, my friend. Okay, let's get back to the episode. Number 7, this is a big question in how we spend our time. If you got an hour in the day or a couple hours after work or whatever chunk of time we're talking about, ask yourself, is this an energizer or is this an escape? I ask this question because a lot of times we do things that we say are energizing, but they're actually just escapes. And the reason why this is important is because time is so precious. And we need to be intentional that we take the time we have to fill our buckets, to re-energize ourselves so that we can come into our families, come into our marriages, into our careers, and be able to pour out of a full bucket, right? To bring our best selves to our careers, our families, to our marriages. But if you come home from work and you just do something that's an escape, you're not filling your bucket. You're basically just pausing everything. You're pausing the fatigue. You're pausing the exhaustion. And you're numbing your brain. Maybe it's drinking. Maybe it's smoking pot. Maybe it's playing video games. Maybe it's, I don't know what it is. But if this thing that you're spending your time on is not energizing you, you're choosing to use this time as an escape. What happens is the next morning when you get up to go to tackle life again, you're not coming at life. You got nothing more in your tank. And so you really want to be intentional about what you're doing with your time to energize you. Maybe that's working out. Maybe that's reading a book. Maybe that's, a hobby that you just really enjoy, really love. Maybe that's doing some extra courses or something to just kind of pour into yourself. Anyways, you get the point. Use that time to energize yourself so that you can better lead your home and yourself, right? Number 8 question is this. This is another doozy. If you were to die tomorrow, would you be proud of the life you lived? If you were to die tomorrow, would you be proud of the marriage that you had with your spouse? If you were to die tomorrow, would you be proud of the relationship or relationships you had with your children? Or are there things that need to be said? Or are there things that need to be redeemed in your relationship? Another way of asking this question, and I was asked this one time in a funeral that I was singing at. Actually, I think I shared this in a previous podcast episode. But he had asked the people in the funeral, "Are you living a life worth imitating?" Are there people looking at your life and saying, "Man, I want to be like him. I want to have the marriage he has. I want to have the relationship with his kids like he has. I want to have the body like he has, or the resilience he has, or the discipline that he has." ask yourself that question. Are you living a life worth imitating? Or if you were to die tomorrow, would you be proud of the life that you lived, the legacy that you left behind? Number 9, how do you want others to perceive you? Or in other words, what do you want to be known for? You want to write these answers down, because these qualities are going to be a good indicator of your deepest desires and your deepest values. What do you want to be known for? One of the things that I want to be known for is I want to be known as a man who goes all in, who works really hard. I don't want people to think, I don't ever want people to say that I'm lazy. That's one of my biggest fears. I'm getting real with you guys today. Ask my wife. It's like my worst nightmare. There's 2 things that when I die that people will say he was a lazy man. And 2, people would say he never made time for me. Those are my 2 biggest fears. And that's interesting, because those 2 things in the inverse, are things that I'm really passionate about, which is pursuing my passions, is working hard, pursuing my dreams, but then also adding value to other people's lives, helping people become better than they once were. Those are 2 of my biggest passions. So naturally, the inverse is some of my fears. And so that's what I want to be. Those are some things that I want to be known for. The question to you is, what do you want to be known for? How do you want others to perceive you? Write down some of those qualities. If you picture a bunch of your friends at a bar or a restaurant, they're talking about you, what do you want them to say about you? And then make steps toward that direction. Would they say he's a pretty terrible husband? Would they say he's an absent dad? Or would they say he just constantly does whatever he wants and he doesn't consider those around him? Some of those questions, right? Do you want to be known as that man, or do you want to be known differently? And number 10, this question is a good one as well. And again, this is not like best for last scenario. It's just the 10th one that I thought of. But the question is this: what are you dreading and what are you dreaming about? What are you dreading and what are you dreaming about? Because listen, we all have things that are draining us of energy. If it's people, I call them energy vampires. It's people who just kind of like suck your energy, and you walk away being like, man, I need something. I need some energy. Or maybe they're just life-draining things. And there are things that you find yourself dreaming about. Maybe you're at work, or maybe you're at home in the morning, you're having coffee and you're kind of thinking through your day. You find yourself getting distracted because you're daydreaming about this thing that you want to do. Maybe this business you want to start, or maybe this hobby you want to pick up, a risk you want to take, or conversation you want to have with your wife, or something you want to do for your family, vacation you want to go on, whatever the situation might be for you. The next part of this question is I want you to make a list of the 3 things that you're dreading. Make a list of the 3 things that are constantly life-draining in your life. And I want you to make a list of 3 things that you're regularly dreaming about. And then the next question becomes, what would it look like for you to take steps away from what you're dreading? And what would it look like for you to take steps toward what you are dreaming about? Okay? So that's your 10 questions. I'll read them again real quick to recap. And as I read these, I want you to really pay attention to which ones stand out to you, because there will be some. I know it, okay? Then write them down or bookmark them, whatever. Come back and then answer them. And be honest with yourself. Listen, the cavalry isn't coming, right? I can't help you change your life. Well, unless you hire me to do that. But outside of that, your wife is not going to do it. Your kids aren't going to do it. You are the only one responsible, and the only person who's going to take action and change your life and make an impact the way that you are feeling in your gut right now that you need to do. Because as I'm saying this, I know there's a fire growing in your gut. So listen to that instinct. All right, listen to that instinct. Okay. Top 10 questions. If you were to call me in 3 years and say, "Holy cow, Mitch, my life is awesome. I'm so happy," what would your life look like? Get specific. Write out that scene. Where are you living? What are you wearing? How old are your kids? What's your marriage like? What does your body look like? How much what are you doing for a living? All those different things. Number 2, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Strip away the fears and dream about what could be. Number 3, what would a blank person do? Remember the Solomon's paradox, or externalizing, right? Or another way of asking that question is, what does your wiser self know that you pretend not to or would rather avoid? Because that deep down, you know what you ought to do. You know what you should do, right? Number 4, if you could wave a magic wand and have everything you want in your blank, what would you fix? If you could wave a magic wand and have everything you want in your marriage, in your parenting, in your body, in your finances, in your spiritual life, whatever the situation might be, what would that look like? Number 5, if you had 1 year left to live, what relationship would you most want to repair or reconnect with? And why does that connection matter to you? Number 6, what are you tolerating in your marriage, in your finances, in your parenting, in your body, in your extended family, all those different things. Number 7, is this an energizer or is this an escape? It's all about how you manage your time and how you're filling your bucket. Number 8, if you were to die tomorrow, would you be proud of the life that you lived? Another way of asking that question is, are you living a life worth imitating? Are other men in your circle looking to you and saying, man, I want the marriage that he has. I want the discipline that he has. I want the career he has, or whatever the situation might be for you. Number 9, how do you want others to perceive you? Or another question is, what do you want to be known for? Write down those qualities and ask yourself, how can I be closer to that man? Number 10, what are you dreading? And what are you dreaming about? And then make a list of the 3 things that you're dreading. Make a list of the 3 things that you're dreaming about. Take steps away from the things you're dreading and take steps toward the things that you're dreaming about. Listen, that's all for me today. I hope that these questions resonate with you deeply. And hey, if you are watching on YouTube and you're listening to this, I want you to drop it in the comments. Okay, what question of these 10 really hits different for you? Which one really kind of popped out? And which one are you going to take action on today? Okay, which one are you going to take action on today? Let me know in the comments. Also, if you're not following the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or if you're not subscribed on YouTube, take a moment to do it, please. I really appreciate it. And lastly, and I've said this before and I say this often, if this podcast is adding value to your life, if this podcast is making you a better man in some way or another, would you consider just jumping on whatever streaming platform you listen on and just give us a rating? And if you want to go next level, give us an actual written review. Or if you want to go to the next level, just share this link to the podcast with some of your friends who might benefit from it. We know that there are thousands of men who are struggling right now in their marriages, with their relationships with their kids, and with their insecurity and lack of self-confidence. They're passionless and purposeless. We know that there are men that are just 1 or 2 steps behind you that could greatly benefit from this. And so if you wouldn't mind, do me a favor, share that link or give us a rating. This is going to help boost us, and the old algorithm is going to help me get this message out so that we can partner together, reach more men, to serve more men in more powerful ways. And again, this is not just about the men. It's about the marriages that will get transformed. It's about the relationships with the children that will be transformed, that will ultimately change generations to come. This is why we're into this business, where good men become great. All right? Listen, have an incredible week. Stay locked in, stay tuned in, and we will catch you next week. I'm here for you in your corner. See ya.